So in this video, I'm going to be making recommendations to every single lady watching this video. And I'm going to be recommending all the things that I think you should look for in a potential male partner. And guys, if you're watching this video as well, take note, because I think there can be some really powerful takeaways for you as well. So with that being said, let's hop into it with point number one. You want to find a man that is emotionally intelligent and not a man that is hyper emotional. So over the last few years, I would say, we've really seen this shift where we now encourage men to talk about their feelings. And a big part of that shift has been really good because we've made some men more emotionally available. But there has been an ulterior side. And that side is we have made a lot of men hyper emotional. So when a man is hyper emotional, he'll constantly be in a state of reactivity. He'll say things like, all women are exactly the same and all women are going to hurt you. He'll constantly react from his emotions rather than constantly reacting from a positive place. And he will probably hold on negative emotions that are in no way, shape or form related to you, and he will probably release them at really unfortunate timings. So when we say hyper emotional, it's important to acknowledge that a certain amount of emotion is normal. But I think what has happened is, as we've encouraged men to talk about their feelings, we've taken down the barrier. And as a result of taking down the barrier, we've now created a world where men feel that they should be able to release all emotions rather than just processing and learning from emotions. And that release is not always healthy. So when we talk about a man that's emotionally intelligent, we're talking about a man that can experience things and talk about how they make him feel. So if a man's been through some trauma in his life, you want to find a man that can talk about it, process it, and talk about what he's learned from it. If you meet a man who's had a bad relationship with an ex-girlfriend, you want to make sure that he can talk about how he would do things differently, how he learned and how he developed as a result of that relationship, and how that's made him a better man today. If a man's anxious or he's stressed or he's struggling with something, you want to find a man that can talk about that and actually talk about it in a solution-focused way whilst acknowledging that that emotion exists. It may sound like a very subtle nuance, but where a guy sits in terms of whether he's emotionally intelligent or hyper emotional is really going to impact your relationship. And you will find that if a guy is hyper emotional, you're probably going to struggle to be around him because he's always going to be leaning into and always going to be releasing his emotions. So if you meet a guy that can talk about his emotions in a mature way, he can talk about what his emotions have allowed him to do and what he's learned as a result from them, that is a straight green flag, because this is a man that will be emotionally mature, emotionally attentive, a man that will be able to solve challenging situations and find a solution, and just a man that will probably give you emotionally what you want. So that is a straight green flag. But a hyper emotional man, I think you should definitely avoid until you see signs of marked improvement in terms of the way he handles his emotions. Number two, you want to find a man that has had a healthy male role model in his life. Or if they haven't had a healthy male role model in their life, they want to become a role model for future generations or for future young men. So there is a state in the world, and unfortunately that state is that a lot of young men are growing up without fathers. This is damaging to all concerned. This will be damaging to future generations. But right now, this is very damaging to you as a woman. What we're really seeing is a lot of young men that are growing up, and when I say young men, I mean men in their 20s, that don't really know what it means to be a man. So they're looking everywhere in order to find what it means to be a man. And I want to illustrate this point a little bit further as well and tell you this. So the two most Googled men of 2022 were Harry Styles and Andrew Tate, two men that are completely different ends of the spectrum. I mean, two men that couldn't be any different. And I'm not going to talk about the damage or the positive message that either of those have had. Instead, I'm going to talk about the fact that there is no real balance in the middle. Society just doesn't really seem to produce these type of men anymore. And this becomes very problematic because of what is known as a parasocial relationship. And a parasocial relationship really tends to mean that people, and in this case we're talking about men, will follow people that they believe represent themselves in the best possible format. So if a man hasn't had a healthy male role model and he finds someone who's potentially an unhealthy male role model, this will be damaging because he will want to emulate that man and he will want to be like that man. So instead, you want to find a man that has had a father figure or an uncle or maybe a boss or a mentor install really positive virtues, because that's going to shape a lot of the way that he behaves, and that's going to shape the way that he treats you massively as well. However, the other side of that is that not every single man has been lucky enough to have that. And that's not something we should discriminate against, and that's not something we should criticize men for. So if you find a man who hasn't had that, but he's managed to turn his life into a positive thing, and he's managed to be a figure in society that gives back, and he now wants to help other men do the same thing. Regardless of where he started in life, that guy should be celebrated, and that guy should definitely be someone that you should date, because that guy is really showing some really strong green flags. So the key thing is looking at whether they've had a male role model, and if they've not, what have they turned their life into, and what do they want to give back as a result of not having a male role model. May sound again like a small thing, but I cannot emphasize to you as a woman how much it will impact on the relationship that you form with that guy. Next up, you need to find a man that has good physical habits, good hygiene habits, and a man that knows how to eat relatively well. So I know that a lot of women aren't necessarily attracted to gym guys because of the connotation and perception that these men can be narcissistic and self-obsessed. And I think in some cases there is an element of truth in that. But at the very least, you need to find a man that knows how to eat well, a man that knows how to exercise and tries to as much as he can, and a man that just practices good physical hygiene, good dental habits, and just treats his body with an element of respect. So generally speaking, I would say that when a lot of men get into a relationship, their desire for comfort generally tends to outweigh their desire to still be seen as attractive. And generally speaking, that kind of makes sense because I think human beings largely crave comfort. However, the long-term implications of that can actually be pretty damaging on the relationship. So if a man puts on a strong amount of weight and becomes lazy and doesn't really practice good hygiene habits, you will lose physical attraction to him. You may still love the man in the same way, but you will lose physical attraction to him. If a man puts on a lot of weight and stops exercising, it will impact on the way that he treats you. He'll get tired earlier, he'll be lazier, and what was generally seen as quite an easy task or quite an easy ask before will suddenly become a lot harder because he doesn't have that same amount of accountability and he doesn't have that same physical energy and that same amount of enthusiasm to do things for you. And it will also become problematic as well if that man becomes a dad, because if he's getting tired quicker, it may mean that he can't play with your kid in the same way, or it may mean that he doesn't have the same energy and enthusiasm to be around your kid in the same way. And this is really important to notice in the early stages, because generally speaking, the way you meet a man is probably going to be the best he is, because most men, as I've said, will be outweighed by their desire for comfort, and they may let their standards slip as a result. So if you meet a man that's not going to do that, you meet a man that has good physical standards and holds himself into high accountability, that is a fantastic sign for the relationship as time progresses. And this is not about saying that he has to look a certain way. This is not about saying he has to have a specific body type. That's your personal preference. But you just want to find a man that has high physical accountability, practices good habits, and really just knows how to conduct himself in a way that is conducive to having a healthy, energetic body. So the next one is probably going to be the most controversial one on this list, but you want to find a man who barely ever watches porn. And if you can find a man that doesn't ever watch porn, that is infinitely better. So porn is one of the most damaging things for men, and it genuinely blows my mind that we don't talk about this enough and we don't actually acknowledge the damage that it does. But Pornhub recently released their 2022 stats, and those stats showed that in the US, 56% of men are watching porn at least 5 times a week. That is an addiction, and like any other addiction, that is a dangerous addiction. There's 2 reasons why I am particularly damaging about porn, and I'll probably discuss this more in a future video. But number 1 is just the way it promotes constant objectification. So if a guy watches a bunch of porn, he will be comparing you to the women that he sees in porn. If a guy watches a bunch of porn, he will compare your sex life to what he sees in porn. And that will eventually mean that he probably becomes desensitized, because what you're doing just plain and simple doesn't cut it, because it's not out there enough, it's not risque enough, and it's not naughty enough. And the other reason why I'm particularly damaging about young men watching porn is the fact that it gives men an out. It is much easier to watch porn rather than working on yourself, learning social skills, making yourself attractive, and actually making yourself desirable to women. And men that watch a lot of porn will always take the easy way out, because it is much easier to take the easy way out rather than doing the work and rather than bettering yourself. So if a man watches a lot of porn, that is a straight red flag. You should avoid that man, because it is going to impact your sex life, it's going to impact the way he looks at you, and it's also going to impact the way he behaves in aspects of his life. And the other thing as well to say, if you start following a man on social media and you notice that he follows a bunch of hot women, and every woman he follows has her ass out in pictures, or he follows a lot of women that post really seductive content, again, you should avoid this guy, because whilst this may not necessarily be porn, He is constantly seeing women that look a certain way. And the more he looks at women like that, and the more he looks at women that look a certain way, the less attractive you are going to see. Because he is going to have changed his beauty standards, he's going to have changed his beauty expectations, and it won't be a realistic standard for you in the vast majority of cases. Number 5, and my last one, you need to find a man that can put boundaries in place. So this is again a controversial statement, but men that behave as nice guys are potentially some of the most dangerous men that you can meet, because these will be the most frustrated men, and these will be the men that will probably hold the biggest amount of resentment to you if they don't get what they want. If you're interacting with a guy and you see in the very early stages that he has no boundaries and he lets you walk all over him, avoid him. It may seem nice at the start, it may seem like he's giving you value and he's treating you really well, but that behavior will not last past the initial few months, and you'll suddenly find a point where he will push back, he will dramatically change, and he will dramatically treat you differently, and it's not going to be nice. You want to find a guy instead that knows how to put boundaries in place, but knows how to put them in a respectful way. You want to find a guy that has a really fulfilling life and he doesn't want anything to compromise, or he doesn't want anything to challenge that. So if a guy puts healthy boundaries in place, he's clear about what he wants, he's clear about what he doesn't want, that should be a massive green flag, because this is a man that has a positive relationship with himself, a man that has a positive relationship with women, and a man that really knows how to convey himself in an emotionally mature way. By contrast, a nice guy that can't do any of those things and doesn't have boundaries and looks for you to give his life value, or a guy that looks for you to give his life excitement and needs you to do that, avoid it. That will be a guy that will treat you badly the minute you don't want to give him those things. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please can I ask you to click like and subscribe down below. And if you really liked it, I am also offering one-on-one coaching at the website also down below. But as always, take care, and I will see you all in the next one.